Hey guys, welcome to the Fantasy Golf Bag Podcast. This is Redkacheek. I just wanted to give a quick heads up before we get going with tonight's show for the Farmers Insurance Open. This show is definitely going to run a little bit longer than our normal 1 hour broadcast, as you probably saw when you were clicking on the show to play. But we had a special guest filling in for Jacob this week, and we were talking about some strategy, some research questions, so a lot of beneficial stuff outside of the actual slate itself. But yeah, we dig into the course, the plays throughout DK's pricing. But just wanted to give you guys a heads up that the show does run a bit longer than normal, but it's all really good content. This is actually probably one of my favorite shows we've done the past year. Picking his brain, our guest this week, and figuring out what he looks for on a week-to-week basis. So hope you stay tuned for the full show. Definitely take a second to give us a rating on iTunes, leave us a review. And without further ado, guys, I'll go ahead and play the intro music and get this show rolling.
Welcome to the Fantasy Golf Bag Podcast, presented by FantasyGolfBag.com, your number one source for the most in-depth PGA Tour analysis in the daily fantasy and sports betting world. Each week, our experts will discuss everything you need to know, from the course preview and key stats to top plays, fades, and strategies. Whether golf betting, grinding out cash games, or playing for a big GPP win, our team has you covered. Let's get after it.
Welcome back, everybody, to the Fantasy Golf Bag Podcast. I am your host, Redkacheek, joined today by a special guest. We gave Jacob a little night off. He'll be back for Wednesday on the live stream, but got a really special guest, actually. Someone I'm really excited to talk to this week through the Farmers, and that is Mr. Nick Varone. Nick, how's it going, man?
We're doing good. I'm happy to be here, and hopefully won't make too much of a fool out of myself and live up to the expectations set by everybody who's already chimed in to listen. So yeah, happy to get into it.
No, man. No, we really appreciate it. No, it's I know it's a little different getting into podcasts and like audio stuff like that, but generally speaking, you just kind of speak your mind. You can't really go wrong. So yeah, again, really thankful for you to fill in today, and kind of recapping off of last week. If before we kind of get into any of the Desert Classic stuff, what's your background kind of coming into DFS, just to give people a better picture of who you are that for some reason may not have heard of you. I'm sure if they've played DFS for any length of time, they've seen you near the top of many leaderboards, or if you've grabbed some head-to-heads. I saw one of our members was already complaining that got paired with you, so enjoy his money. But give me a little walkthrough of your history through DFS, and how you would kind of give your explanation of how you go about each week.
Sure. Yeah, Orange Man already complaining about the head-to-heads pickup.
Yeah.
I have a background in finance, mostly in research, a lot of analytical work. I mean, it plays really well into the DFS mindset. It's like I tell everybody, I can take a lot of the skills I do in work and kind of transfer them into DFS. I'll say, golf for DFS is easily my favorite sport. I've been playing it since 2015. And I have a couple, actually. I'm happy to be on this week in particular because the first tournament I ever made a run at was actually the Farmers when Woodland had the lead after 54 and Sneds went out early and basically just shot even par, went in the clubhouse and won the tournament. That was like the first huge sweat I had because I had done a lot of smaller stuff before that. But yeah, in general, I mean, background kind of feeds well into it. I run a couple different models every week, but I got to say the biggest thing is like picking up information and kind of transferring that using the same analytical skills that I do for work. It's pretty great. But yeah, so I mean, I dabble in NFL and NBA as well, but in general, golf is what I love. It's the best sweat in sports.
Absolutely. You get like multiple ones through the week. Your money lasts a little bit longer than a quick showdown slate or NFL Sunday only. But do you consider yourself a tournament player primarily, or do you play cash, or how do you kind of divvy up your bankroll each week?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and it's something that I've kind of evolved over the last couple of years. Originally, I started just playing tournaments. I was chasing big prizes, and then I kind of realized that was a mistake. Some people are just strictly tournament players, and they can be successful at it. But I guess for longevity, I thought it was good to diversify each week, and I'd do close to like a 50-50 split in between GPPs and cash each week. I mass multi-enter, so I'm in the $5. I typically max that every week, and then maybe I'll enter some single entry stuff. And some great advice I got from listening to one of Peter Jennings, CSU Ram. He always talked about using a league, what you call the leagues lineup. So I'll run that typically in like the GC Cup on Gup's Corner. I'll run that in like a lot of single entry stuff, and then I'll run a cash team as well, and kind of diversify my bankroll in different spots. So that's my typical approach. And I mean, throughout the podcast, we're going to be talking about different players. If you hear me say that I'm going to fade somebody, I know this is kind of everybody has their own definition. If I say I'm going to fade somebody, it means I'm going to fade that person. I'm not playing he won't be on a single lineup. I know some people kind of equate that with underweight, or might toss them on one or two. But yeah, I would say try to keep a relatively tight player pool and kind of go from there.
Yeah, that's awesome. No, I like the kind of rolling into cash. I think golf has a really unique way to build lineups for cash, because you're more or less building an optimal lineup, and many times it has a high ceiling. Like, you're picking the best players that are safe to make a cut, but also generally have the best chance of finishing high in the event anyways. Football doesn't always equate, cash and GBP don't always kind of match up. But, since I started getting more into cash, I think it really helped my lineup construction for building GPPs as well. Just because you can kind of see where you continue to fall on guys that you consider cash worthy. And in GPPs, that's not always the case just from an ownership perspective. Do you tend to shy away from ownership, or is that even a piece of the puzzle for you?
So that's awesome. I really like that question a lot. And I'll say for cash purposes, I typically don't look at ownership at all. I will say over the past year or so, I've been testing a couple different cash strategies just to see if I can become even more profitable in that level, especially playing so many head-to-heads each week. And I forget who originally it was, but there's been a lot of talk of different cash strategies out there of like, yeah, you want 6-6 through, but if you just pick like the JJ Spawns every week, you're probably not going to win in cash if you get 6 of them through.
Yeah.
As much as 6-6 makes a difference, there are a lot of 6-6 teams out there. So like you just said, you want to chase a little bit of upside there. So for ownership and cash, I don't really look at it. I try to get as much upside as I can, while also, like you said, make somewhat of an optimal lineup. But for GPPs, ownership actually plays a big part in my strategy. And I'll mention it a couple times when we're talking through guys, that I have a lot of players listed, and there's a huge pool out this week, and it's such a strong field that there are a lot of guys in there that if they start getting chalky, in the 8K range, that's like close to 20% for me. In the 7K range, it's like above 12 to 14%. And then in the 6K range, anybody above 8. That's like kind of how I view chalky at each level.
That's a good rule.
And I'll start fading guys based on that in GPPs.
Okay. Very nice. Yeah, it's kind of funny you mentioned the upside play on the cash as well, because like this last week was interesting to me, and I tried to deploy a slightly different strategy than a normal week. But with the three rounds guaranteed, I almost built a stars and scrubs type lineup for cash, and it ended up working out. But I almost essentially punted my 6th spot, because I grabbed such a cheap 6K guy, and I just knew that getting 3 rounds of him, if he played reasonably well, he would basically pay off that, and allows me to pay up, for 3 guys over 8,500. Most
absolutely.
weeks, most weeks that's not really the case. You can't really risk, a $6,200 or $6,400 guy that's probably going to miss the cut. But it was really weird with the three different courses. They're guaranteed 3 rounds, very low scoring. So I look for guys that are going to make birdie. It was just it felt like a dirty cash lineup almost. And I was talking to you before the show. I played with Jason Roslin and Dan Bach, both from Rotor Grinders, and they kind of, or at least Jason kind of mentioned the same strategy. He had a $6,400 guy in the higher dollar stuff, and essentially said the same thing. Like, he punted that 6th spot, and I thought I was in the minority, and he mentioned that. I was like, well, I guess that's a good thing. At least I was kind of on the right track. But yeah, it definitely, each week is slightly different. You're trying to kind of chase the safe, but you need that upside. You can't just, like, there's no guaranteed, you're not trying to hit a 5X guy like an NBA for cheap. You really need a guy that's still going to finish, in the top 30 on that lower end of your lineup.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more.
All right, well, let's before we kind of move on, I do have a couple podcast notes for some shout outs, so I want to get that out of the way. It was actually, I felt like, I don't know how you felt about this week, but I felt like there was like 2 ends of the spectrum. Like, there were some people that did extremely, extremely well, and kudos to them. And then some people were like, man, this was the worst tournament ever. The cut was -9, and this was just ridiculous. Did you have kind of similar thoughts? Maybe not personally, but just like the industry in general. I just felt like, half the people I talked to were really distraught, and then half the people had these amazing weeks. Maybe just missing out on some of the landmines like Joaquin Niemann and some of the, Bud Colley, the chalkier names that missed the cut.
Yeah, absolutely had the same thought throughout the kind of viewpoint throughout the industry. I had a pretty mediocre, poor week, to be honest, but it was kind of the same thing. And this goes back to why I love DFS golf so much, is that if you weren't sweating the cut line on Saturday afternoon, oh my God, there were more guys on either side of the cut with a ton of ownership. Everybody should have been looking at that. Or following that, because it was such a good sweat. It really encapsulated how entertaining DFS golf can be, and kind of compounding on that. I mean, like I said, I had a pretty poor week, and the reason was I probably bubbled like 3 or 4 of the guys that were on the wrong side, but it was still such a good, example of kind of what the positives of DFS golf are. And like, you kind of have to realize that sometimes it's just not going to work out. And I mean, I brought it up with Kevin Na earlier in the season when he withdrew. Like, he was my either second or third highest owned guy and completely levered the field, and then withdrew without hitting a shot. And like, brutal. That sucked, but at the same time, it was still, it happens. Yeah,
that's brutal. And it doesn't happen so much in golf either. It's just a slap in the face when it does happen. There's no injury tags. I don't know. Right. And for golf, like, coming from like playing in tournaments, like it didn't take much for like a nagging injury to really bother you. Like McIlroy, I think, withdrew from the Honda a couple years ago with like a toothache. And like in football, I'm sure these guys are, they're getting concussed every week. So like a toothache's not that big of a deal. But for golf, like little hand injuries and a toothache, like, it can be really annoying.
Rahm had the flu this week, and nobody knew until after he finished his round on Thursday.
That's news to me. I didn't see that.
Yeah, he said he was battling the flu. He said he wasn't 100%, and he was like barely making it through the round on Thursday.
Yeah, man. And it's interesting with golf too, because a lot of those guys, because it's such a one player versus the field, they want to keep a lot of that to themselves. So like if he's going down the stretch, like Tiger was really good at that. He never, if he was ever hurt or sick or anything, he never let anyone know that he was, basically not 100%.
That's why he's the GOAT. It's the flu game mentality all the time.
Yep. There's an old saying, and I'll probably screw this up, but it's I think it's like, be weary of the sick golfer. And the basic genesis of that was like, if you're, golf's such a mental game, but if you have something that can kind of sidetrack you a little bit, like you're sick, or you're really focused on just like one step at a time because you got the flu, whatever it is, that takes you off of having to focus for 4 hours on golf. And it's like we saw Jason Day last year. withdrew on Wednesday, and then he goes out and wins it. I'm sure it dropped ownership by like 15% from he's probably going to be 25, maybe 30%, and dropped it down to what 10% or something.
He's the legend of going out there and withdrawing from pro-ams and winning the tournament. I think he's done it like 2 or 3 times now. It's just absurd.
I think that's the new narrative for him since last year. It's like if he's got vertigo or any other sickness, just play him. He's going to win.
Pile on.
Yeah. So, but yeah, let's go ahead and start diving in. The couple of shout outs I do have, we had a huge Yahoo winner and he gave us a shout out on Twitter. So kudos to this dude, Jonathan Johnson. Won $6K on Yahoo. I don't know if you've been toying around with Yahoo, but we missed all the overlay for golf. They only gave that for the NFL, but I think he won 2 of the contests. So it was a 5K win and a 1K win for $6K total. So big congrats to Jonathan Johnson.
And that was the big the $10 GPP, right?
Yeah, I think so.
So that one was no rake.
Rake.
I think it's still rake free this week too.
Okay. Yeah, they call it a no management fee. I did see that in the lobby. But yeah, we don't get any of the 250K overlay that they're adding to the NFL contest. That would be nice. So congrats to Jonathan Johnson. Another one in the PME Open, which I assume you are participating in, Nick. I know it's been filling quick, but definitely enjoying the they do not have any type of rake, which is good. This week it's 1,000 people I saw. But Chris Foster, and he's got a pretty sick DFS name, goes by Gasboat1, and finished 3rd place. So he gave us a shout out, as well as Pat Mayo himself, and congrats on the baby, Pat. And the last one I got, I don't know if I'm sure you are familiar, Nick, but Mike Brown, H3 Buddha, has been on a crazy heater, and he won. So it's not completely golf related, but I had to give him a shout out because he's been blowing up my Twitter about it. Have you seen this? He
hit 6 figures. What was it yesterday, right?
Well, did he hit 6 figures as well? I saw he hit 14K in the NFL Showdown. He was way up there on FanDuel in a couple contests. I don't know where he ended up, but he was like, man, I wish I played more than $200 because he was up to like 2 or 3K, and had he played in the 333 Monster, whatever it is, he would have really crushed. Just won a tennis qualifier, and then he's been crushing MMA since the inception of MMA ever began. So,
and he hit the qualifier for that. Was that?
Yeah, he was
Did he hit the qualifier for that as well?
I think so. Yeah, a couple weeks ago he hit that, and then he had one this weekend. He did well, but I don't know if he had a qualifier then. But nonetheless, he's been on a crazy heater. And then I think it all began, and Mike can probably attest, he won a hybrid off our Twitch live stream on Wednesdays like 2 weeks ago. So hopefully that's going on. I've seen you in there, so hopefully that's been, somewhat entertaining or beneficial. But yeah, every Wednesday night, that was a new addition we wanted to do this year, and really had a lot of fun with it. I think guys enjoy that kind of Wednesday night last minute prep.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Part of my entire process is like Wednesday night is a huge night, but you also have to digest a lot. So going over it in like a Twitch feed like that you run, or like I know the Gups Corner guys, I'm usually in their chat on Wednesday night, and like just having that last minute kind of clarification is always just really good.
Yeah, no, I agree, because it is a lot. You start on Monday and you're gathering all this information. Tuesday, you're trying to not forget what you learned about on Monday, but still add some stuff. And then Wednesday, it's really time to, sit down and what does it all mean? So definitely helps. And then you add a little weather in there. I think it's been very beneficial to me as well, for sure. So yeah, without further ado, let's go ahead and dive into the Farmers Insurance Open. They're playing 2 different golf courses. They have the North and the South. And I'll go ahead and give a little kind of my snapshot of the 2 courses and kind of what I'm eyeing as far as the tournament goes, and I'll let you kind of fill in any gaps you might have there, Nick.
Sure, sounds good.
All right, so the South course and the North course, the tournament will be played on both on Friday or on Thursday and Friday. The South will be primarily used on Saturday and Sunday after the cut, and these are drastically different golf courses. I think there are some similarities, which I'll kind of note here in just a second. But for reference, the South Course is a 7,700 yard beast. It's last year ranked 8th most difficult on tour. The birdie average was 7th most difficult, averaging just over 3 birdies around. And the birdie or better percentage at 17.4% was 6th most difficult on tour. Driving accuracy here, and I'm not entirely sure what the rough is at this year. I assume it's going to be very similar to the last few years, but driving accuracy was at 48.82%, which ranked most difficult on tour. And as well as green and regulation ranked 7th most difficult. Putting average also ranked 9th most difficult. So as you can see, this is a very difficult golf course. Stroke average was 72.81, so 0.8 strokes over par on average. And then you transition to the North Course, which these guys will play either Thursday or Friday. It was the 28th most difficult, so averaged about half a stroke under par. Driving accuracy, again, was 4th most difficult, but I don't think the rough is as penal in this golf course. It averaged just under 4 birdies per round. And again, the green and regulation was up there for difficulty. It was 19th most difficult on tour, so definitely not as tough as the South. And then putting average ranked 10th most difficult on tour. So if I'm not mistaken, both of these greens are different. We have POA on the South Course, and I think it's bent on the North Course. So as most people know, bent's usually pretty true, but they'll only see that one round. And then you get the POA on the South Course for those 3 rounds for the guys that make the cut. So honestly, man, I'm really looking at ball striking stats and mixing in a little bit of putting. I know putting is one I typically deter people from looking at too much. Putting splits, there is something to be said for it, but when the putting numbers look so difficult, there's a couple things I like to look at. One was the putting average in general was really difficult. The 3-putt avoidance was very difficult. And then inside of 10 feet was 5th most difficult. So I add into what I look at for this type of event. I look at 3-putt avoidance and putting from inside of 10 feet. I added in fairways gained. There was a huge discrepancy from the fairway. If I can find this real fast. Yeah, we got proximity to the hole averaged about 40 feet, and that's all distances. Then when you look at the rough proximity, it was averaging 50 feet, so about a 10-foot difference. So it's definitely going to be penalizing if you're hitting in the rough consistently here. So you'll see guys that, it's so long on the South Course. You definitely want to get guys that are bombing it, that have the length advantage. So I am looking at strokes gained off the tee, but I am adding the fairways gained as a little buffer. Looking at green and regulation, I think that's huge this week, as well as strokes gained approach and bogey avoidance, just because the winning score should only be, 6 to 8 under par. It looks like the last, 2018 it was 10 under, 2017 13 under, 2016 6 under. So right around that 8 to 11 under par. But yeah, that's pretty much what I'm looking at. I think really targeting ball strikers that are coming off of some events. I think in this kind of field, you're not going to get a ton of the elite guys that have been playing the weeks prior. Justin's an interesting one. Justin Rose we'll get to here shortly. But yeah, these guys, you really want ball strikers. You want guys that have a little bit of length, but we've seen guys that are shorter, like, CT Pan over the years. Charles Howell isn't the longest. He's done pretty well. So I think there's a good mix, but generally speaking, I want some ball strikers here. So what are you kind of looking at, Nick?
Yeah, I think you hit on a lot of good points. A lot of what I'm looking at, I'd say the 3 main stats I'm in on. So I should actually take a step back and say that I run 2 models every week. One of them's on Fantasy Labs, so I use just pure stats there, where it's like, driving accuracy, distance, greens and regulation, birdies, etc.
Yep.
And those are measurable on all courses, so it has a little bit more data. Mm-hmm. And then I also run one on Fantasy National that has the rankings, kind of the more PGA Tour-esque stats, like the strokes gained and all. The other things that you were just listing.
Yep.
And I would say that of the Fantasy National kind of the PGA Tour stats, I'm looking at distance, I'm looking at strokes gained approach, and I'm looking at bogey avoidance as my 3 main stats. One thing that I think is important for to kind of lay out. I like that you're using off the tee and fairways gained together. I think that it's a huge mistake to just use off the tee without layering in something like fairways gained. And the reason is because if you just took strokes gained off the tee and then you add strokes gained approach, you're basically leveling out the strokes gained categories and like mitigating their effect, because the way that they're calculated has to do with like distance, but also whether you hit the fairway. So like if you're in the rough or you're in a hazard off the tee, it's a negative to your strokes gained off the tee. And then if you're hitting it out of the rough or out of a hazard towards the green, it's a huge positive on your strokes gained approach. So for me, I'm looking more at distance and then hitting it out of the rough from distance, because I think that that's, like you said, on our roll in that, it's really hard to hit the fairways, 40 whatever percent. And that to me just screams that it's going to be strokes gained approach, because if so many people are missing the fairways, I want the guys who are going to be on the green after missing. And it's the thick Kikuyu rough on the South Course in particular.
Yep. And
there are a lot of bunkers in play off the tee on the South. So for me, I think strokes gained approach is going to be the number one stat. But I want to layer in distance. And then the bogey avoidance, I think, should capture a bit of like your putting theory. I think you're right. I hesitate to use putting, but what I typically do is I'll look at the players' putting ranks, and then in particular putting on Bent and Poa. So I'll kind of layer that all through. I also have one quote from Jeff Ogilvy it was on one of the Fried Egg podcasts. And he said that long grass, and maybe you can correct me, I know you're a pro out there, the amateur 20 handicap, but Jeff Ogilvy had a good quote about how long grass around the green, it really diminishes a lot of players' chipping skills, because like the skillful chippers, because it's a lot easier to kind of just, I don't know kind of the physics behind it, but it basically mitigates any advantage, because you're not hitting out of thin lies, the difficult thin lies. Everybody kind of, as long as the ball is sitting, you can get a good club face on it. It really helps the weaker chippers. So for bogey avoidance, I think taking that into account, it really speaks a little bit more to the putting side of it, which is basically what you said.
Yeah, I 100% agree on the putting too. Like, it's certainly the most variable stat, or at least like a top two most variable stats. I think sometimes scrambling can be up there, because guys will miss like, one or two greens around sometimes and not get up and down, and it looks like, oh, they didn't get up and down at all, like 0% this week. Well, he missed 4 greens all week. He missed 1 green a day and didn't get up and down. It's not a big deal.
Right.
But 3-putt avoidance is usually pretty stable, just because, there'll be difficult golf courses as far as 3-putts, but the good putters, whether or not they make a ton of putts, like they may not have 23 putts in a round every single round, but they're not going to have a bunch of 3-putts. Like they're long putting, they're lagging it up there close, or they're good short putters. Either way you cut it, the 3-putt avoidance is usually a pretty good, indicator of the putting skills, more or less. And then it's just a matter of when they get to the tournament, if they're putting well. Like, the guys just get hot, it just happens. But I really like the idea too on your first model, talking about some, like, I call them traditional stats. I've added that quite a bit of late. I think I won't get into it too much on this podcast, but yeah, I think there are some potential issues if you're just looking at strokes gained data, where you don't want to include some of the shots that they use. And like I said, I won't really get into much of the finite details on this podcast, but I think green and regulation is big for me. Like we talked about, if Justin Rose only attacks a couple pins around, but 20 feet left of a hole in the US Open is good, or 30 feet left of the hole is good from 150 yards, but strokes gained approach says otherwise, I still want a Justin Rose type hitting all those greens in regulation in that type of event.
Sure.
And I think that carries over to many tournaments in general. But yeah, I think those type of traditional stats are huge. So I would highly encourage people that if they don't have that capability, or they're not sure how to use it, but at least eyeball it and maybe get a feel. Because you'll see some guys like Ches Reavie a couple weeks ago in the Sony Open. Granted, he did hit a lot of greens. He played well, so it's probably not the best example. But, just holing out a wedge shot from 130 will jack up your strokes gain approach numbers for the next week. So and that's just one round. That's just one shot, one round. He could have hit it terrible that week and still would have looked good. I
think one last thing to layer in too is that I don't know how back people usually look at course history. I typically, it's a factor, but it's not a huge factor for me. But I will say that course history on these courses is going to be a little odd because a couple of them have been redone. Yeah. A couple of the holes have been redone, especially in 2016. They basically I think they added, I want to say 40% to green size. It was 30 or 40% to green size on the North course. So the greens are huge. So proximity for that, but I don't know if I want to really layer that in. And then on the South course, it's really narrow greens. So I want guys who are, like you said, ball strikers. That's perfect. I mean, yeah, because you want guys who are going to be able, if they're off by a number, then, they're still okay. But you don't want guys who are just flaring it out there. And you really want somebody who's going to be dialed in and in that respect. That's why another reason why I like approach, because I think it takes it a little bit. But, so I'll just leave it there, though.
I like that. Let me ask you one more thing, and then we'll kind of get into the players. Because I think I'm interested in your thought, and then from a financial, more of a statistical analysis or more quantitative type of analysis, we'll say, what's your thoughts in general on course history? And I'll use last week's example as far as Hadwin. And, generally speaking, from a golfing background, there is, whether or not it's quantifiable, course history is a thing. You show up to a golf course, you've played well out in the past, you get a vibe. We've seen it time and time again, but again, it's, the statistics people behind it will say, you can't prove it. Well, that's true. But it happens to players, whether it's mental or whatever. But a guy like last week with Hadwin coming in with such poor form, I couldn't even pull the trigger on, 3 straight top fives or whatever he had going into last week. And then, he almost won and would have made me look like an idiot. So, that's a very drastic example maybe, but what's your general thoughts on course history, or how do you use it quantifiably, or do you just kind of eyeball it to see, maybe I should consider this guy?
I have some pretty extensive thoughts. I won't go completely down the rabbit hole, but my thought on course history, really the thesis of it is that I think golf is a very mental game, and I think guys that have good shot thoughts, you tend to have better shot thoughts when you play courses really well. And that's the kind of qualitative reasoning behind it. As far as the quantitative side, I think that courses are set up in certain ways where certain statistics make players play better at certain courses. And from that respect, if a guy, has a really good course fit and then has good course history there, I think it just kind of makes sense. Now, there are anomalies where, somebody might have a horrible fit at a course and he just likes it. And I'm kind of front running a quote I was going to use, but Ollie Schneiderjans. So he has said multiple times in the past that Torrey just fits his eye. He could play really terrible and still be in contention. Is he had that egregious, I won't say egregious, but that hot of a take of I just play horribly and still, be in contention because I love the course. Scott Piercy a couple weeks ago where he just was oh man, course history. So he says he loves the course, so he might as well. So he has to have good course history. Mm-hmm. So I guess I'm kind of in the middle where I think that stats and kind of players' strengths speak to why certain courses fit them. Yeah. And then that's on the quant side. And then I think that, from a shot, mental game thing, I mean, look at Speith right now. He's just kind of all out of sorts and all over the place. But so I think from a mental side, having good shot thoughts is always a positive. So I'll give a little credence to it, but I won't bake in too much. On my labs, I'll give you a sneak peek, is that on my labs model this week, I did put course driving distance because of how some of the holes are set up. I wanted to see, guys who have played Torrey in the past, kind of how are they positioning themselves compared to how they usually position themselves. And that's kind of a really minutia piece, but in general, I think it's a mental game. Like you can tell when guys are just completely out of sorts and, flaring shots all left and right. But so that's basically how I view it. So it's a factor, but it's not the biggest factor.
Dude, this could turn into, we could make this into a hour and a half, 2 hour long podcast talking about this stuff. Like,
oh yeah,
again, talking about like the driving distance on that course specifically versus a different course. You would see two different numbers, for Gary Woodland here versus Mayakoba, for example. Like
it happens all the time.
Yeah.
I mean, Woodland is a great example because he's so good at courses where you don't need driver, but because he has that 2-iron stinger that he just shoots low. And I mean, yeah. Anyway,
Dude.
we could probably go on for a couple hours on that.
We'll have to reschedule that sometime.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, we're moving along slow. So this is good stuff though, man. I really appreciate it. Let's dive into the players and kind of hit on our high points. Again, we have the live stream Wednesday night on Twitch, and that is found at twitch.tv/Redkacheek. And that'll be this Wednesday, 9 p.m. Eastern. We'll run about an hour long, touching on the weather, some changes in our player sentiments, ownership. We'll touch on some fan share ownerships. And yeah, give our final thoughts on anybody else in the field. So without further ado, man, let's jump into the 10K and above. We got 5 guys over 10K. I think, the main draw will be Tiger Woods, whether or not he's be popular. I'm sure like the $5 and $3 stuff, people will come out of the woodwork to play him. But yeah, I'll kind of list out the guys that I'm most excited to play over 10K. And that to me is Jon Rahm. Obviously, great course history coming off of last week, which I personally think he's very disappointed about. He won this event back in 2017. 29th last year was a disappointment. And then last week, just kind of watching his mannerisms. And then you mentioned the flu thing, but 6th place last week, and he putted so bad. I mean, he was pissed all of the final round. So I really feel like he's like, wouldn't say excited, but he's like geared up to play well here this week. And the other one is Justin Rose. I think Justin Rose, now that he played in the States last week, he wasn't over in Dubai. He normally plays over in Dubai. Back-to-back top 10s on this golf course. I like Justin Rose a good bit. The others up there, like Rory, he hasn't played here. Looking at some of his numbers on the PGA Tour and then the European Tour from this last year, his driving accuracy numbers don't look the best. So he kind of scares me off in that top range. But I'll kick it over to you. But those are kind of the two names that stick out to me the most if I'm, looking to spend up this week, and that'd be Jon Rahm and Justin Rose.
Yeah, so first off, let me just say that in this range, these 10K and up guys, they're all going to be in my player pool, whether I'm severely underweight a bunch of like 3 or 4 of them, and then I'll be overweight on one or, some combination thereof. I'll throw that out there first, but I will say, I think that Jason Day is going to get overlooked. So in GPPs, Jason Day and Rory, I think, are going to get way overlooked for the talent level. Rory, stat-wise, is like, I think he's 4th or 5th in my my Fantasy National model, and then he's, I think, 3rd in my Fantasy Labs model. Mm-hmm. And I think that anytime I get a low-owned Rory, I'm going to try to be overweight him, even if and I know that he hasn't played this course before, and it really, but it's one of those courses where he can just bomb it out there, and as long as he's not in too much of trouble, if he's just in thick rough, he's got the strength to get out of it.
Oh yeah.
I'm a little worried about Rahm's ownership this week, and it's something that I'm going to watch throughout the week. So again, I don't make any final calls on my how much I'm going to be overweight, underweight guys until Wednesday night. But Rahm's ownership is something I'm severely watching, because if he's over like 25, if he's over 25%, I'm probably going to be way under the field. Mm-hmm. And then I'll probably just shift that. I really love Rose. I'm afraid he's going to be up there as well, but not quite as afraid.
Yeah, I think he'll be lower than you think. Could
Tiger's
be wrong.
Tiger's going to take a lot of it.
I think he'll take a good chunk, but I think with Rahm right there over Rose, Rose wasn't talked about a lot last week. And, you could argue that Rahm's course history versus Justin Rose is, maybe better just because he won in 2017. But, Rose looks pretty great. But I think just off of last week, Rose didn't get any publicity, like none. And granted, he didn't finish as well as he normally finishes, but I think that should deflate it slightly. And then having Tiger in there, it could be, like you mentioned, Rory. I think Rory's very interesting. But I think it's kind of a perfect storm for some of these guys that you'll get them relatively very low owned versus any other week that they're playing.
Yeah, and the public money, this is some other ownership nerdisms coming in, but I think a lot of public money is coming in this week because all right, cool, go play the Pro Bowl and like let me know how that goes.
Yeah.
But with no playoff football and you're kind of in a weird spot basketball wise, and I think that a lot of public money is going to come. It's the marquee kind of January event, given the strength of this field is unbelievable. We have guys in like the 8K range that if there were 2 or 3 fewer players in the kind of that upper tier, they could easily be like high 9s.
Absolutely.
So
yeah, we just saw them high 9s, some of these guys, last week or the week before. Pretty crazy. So what's your thoughts on Tiger? I don't know if you want to divulge that information, but he doesn't stand out to me like if he's going to be popular at 10-5. It's hard to bet against Tiger. I mean, he's playing a lot better. Especially here. I 100% agree. It's just, I still doubt a little bit of where he's at in his game, even though he finished the year off so strong. So it might be my, I'm just being naive a little bit, but I don't know. I feel like he's maybe in GPPs. It just depends on the ownership. I just feel like this is one of those weeks where people jump at it, and it's not the best time to be sharp and like, yeah, we'll play Tiger this week.
Yeah, I think for me, it's going to a lot depend on the ownership. I'm going to have some just because I would hate myself if I didn't have any, particularly because he ranks first in my model for strokes and approach. And I mean, he obviously has the history here. It's the best history in the field by like 10 miles. So I'm going to have some. I'm not going to like completely pound the table and say I'm going to have 100% Tiger. If you ask me one guy I'm going to have in this range, it's probably going to be, or 2 guys I'd say, because Rose is like a lock for me. But Rose and Rory are probably the 2 guys, and we'll see where ownership kind of falls for the other 3. That's kind of how I'm looking at it.
Okay. I like it. Let's drop down into the 9K, and there's not too many to pick from, but I'll let you lead off this range and kind of give me your high points or low points if you have any in this 9K range.
Drew, this range is sexy. This is just it is a sexy range.
You can start some lineups in this range and then load up part of the 8K and
my God,
really be solid.
Yeah, and I have some thoughts. When we get to the 8K range, I have a couple like comments there too. But Gary Woodland, I mean, him at 9K for me this week with the history he has here. Yeah. And I mentioned, my first run, I had a bunch of Gary Woodland in the year he lost to Snedeker, and I can tell you that he played during like monsoons when he lost. It wasn't like he played just a crappy round on Sunday. It was a Monday finish, and Snedeker finished on Sunday, and everybody else was kind of like completely out of it. So I'll say I like Gary Woodland a lot, and then I like Tony Finau and Patrick Cantlay. Those are my 3 guys in this range. Leishman is a weird for me this week because he's another one that he says this course fits his eye. There was a no laying up quote from his caddy Matty Kelly about how like he should win Farmers every year. So I hate to bet against that, but it's kind of a weird spot. But yeah, Finau, Cantlay, Woodland, probably my guys this week.
Okay. Yeah, Leishman's in a weird spot at that price. Like he seems like a no-brainer. He's obviously playing really well. His last 3 finishes are all top 4s. In his last couple of events, not at this golf course. His last 2 showings were 20th and 8th. And then you got Finau right above him. So that, yeah, I agree on Finau. I think he's probably one of the most popular in the 9K range for sure. Then you go down to the bottom range. Like, I'm still interested in Charles Howell at 9,100. Cantlay kind of screws things up because I like Cantley a lot last week. Didn't play him as much as I planned to, but he just kind of spit the bit on Sunday. He's only played here twice and hasn't really done much, but I feel like this is a good course for him again. Kind of like last week, we didn't have much course history, and it looks like it fits him. So it really, like, the whole 9K outside of Fowler and Xander, I still don't understand. I can't get him right ever. But
yeah, same. And Xander, like, that's one of the guys that I've already pressed the fade button on this week. I'm off. I'm completely out on Xander. I'll let him burn me again. He can go out and win the tournament by 5. It's okay.
Yeah.
I'll be able to live with myself afterwards. But one note on Ricky. Ricky switched balls. This will be the first competitive round he's playing with TaylorMade.
Yep.
So just a quick note there. CH3. I mean, I like it. He's got the history too. He's got how many top 10s, top 15s, or whatever. So I'm in on it. And it's a tournament in California, so that means that he's probably like 50-50 to finish in the top 10.
Yeah.
So you can convince me. But that's why I said this is such a sexy range, that to boil it down to 3 guys, like I'm gonna have Leishman, I'm gonna have Cantley, I'm gonna have Howell, I'm gonna have Woodland. So like it's kind of like the comment I was gonna say about the 8K range is that I think the 8K range is where any people playing GPPs is going to be able to lever the field with the 8K range, because the 9K range is so awesome.
Yeah. With
the ownership that could probably go above into the 10K range, that the 8K range like disappears, and it becomes a stars and scrubs week.
Yep. So
that's just my 2 cents there.
Because there's still really good plays, cheap. I mean, there's a couple of decent ones in the 6K and the low 7s. Like, it sets up it's setting you up for a stars and scrubs type of week. And like you said, it'd be pretty sharp to kind of avoid either of those and go pretty balanced, because the guy, this mid range, even 8K and 9K, like, the winner, I wouldn't say is just as likely, but I mean, they're probably stud worthy. Like, they're good names in the 8 and 9s.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't know how closely you look at kind of Vegas odds and how it relates to salary, but this is probably the first week that I can remember where the betting favorite, and Rom is the betting favorite currently. So I'm on Labs right now, but this is the first week where the betting favorite didn't have 10% or higher odds to win, like implied odds to win,
right?
And that, like, in months.
Because this field's so stacked.
Yeah.
I mean,
at the middle, which is kind of in my opinion, that's really good for anybody worth their salt in DFS golf, because it makes it pretty tough to go about lineup construction.
Yeah.
So it should be good. Should be a good week.
Yeah, it should be. Just looking down, like, the world rankings, like the top 20 in this field in world rankings points, like, they all look like they could win here. Like, it's just ridiculous. So like, kind of capping off the 9K, I'm kind of with you. I think Xander is a fade, and that's strictly off of the missed cuts here. Like, I don't know if you have anything else to go off of, but, like, for me personally, I'm just trying to pick them right on some weeks. Like, apparently, like, at the Tournament of Champions, I didn't play them, and, like, kind of the whole week prepping for that, I was skipping over them, and I could, like, sense the burn. Like, it was coming. And then it did. And, this week, I can make logical decisions to say, okay, I'm going to fade Xander. He's obviously never played well here. And same with Ricky. Like, the ball thing doesn't really scare me, but, like, those two things scare me off of those guys. The rest of the 9K just is too good to pass up. So, it'll be very interesting on cash builds, because I don't think guys will be falling onto the same plays, assuming they, feel the same way we do. But I'm really interested. I think what I did earlier today was I like to listen to last year's podcast the week after this event, or whatever event we're at. Doesn't always help, but it's kind of interesting if people have, like, really absurd comments. And one of the comments that I heard was, cash was so easy this last week because, I was able to get 6 of 6 through, and people, they kept starting with, Tiger at 9,700 last year, and they fell in these landmines, so and so and so and so. So I think cash lineups this week will be very interesting because, you know, if you start with Jon Rahm or Justin Rose, you're going to have drastically different builds than if you started with a Tony Finau or a Mark Leishman, or if you even went down to a Charles Howell and Gary Woodland to start. Like, it could be very interesting in cash builds.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I also think that the field, like I mentioned, the field strength this year is far superior than anything I can remember as far as previous years. I mean, no Phil, so that kind of chops out a lot of course history ownership there, but because he's won it 3 times here, so no Phil, but you know, I think that there are so many studs in this field and all the way down to 8K that, you know, cash will be fun. Cash will be it'll be like a really good brain exercise in my opinion for cash this week.
I'm actually looking forward to it. So what I do is I build 2 cash lineups, and I more or less hedge almost every single player in one way or another. And
do you enter them in different contests? So like, and I won't delve too far down your strategy sheet here, but like, do you enter one in head-to-heads and one of them in 50-50s, or do you ship one of them like equally in both or whatever?
I try to do equally in both. So the thought process behind that is with 150 people in the field and you're picking out, let's just say I did 12 completely different players in 2 cash lineups. There's, I think maybe 25 or 30% of lineups finished like above the cash line of GPPs that had a 6-player rotation all the way down. Like, it was some absurd number last year. So, and that strictly comes from placement points and scoring. So like, you could just start with, you know, the top range here, Jon Rahm, Justin Rose, jump down into the 9s or the 8s, you know, and you're picking out a different guy. You drop down, you know, assuming like there's a slight hedge there where if, you know, one lineup completely tanks and you're not really making anything, but there's chances where during the year, both lineups almost finish equally the same as far as points go. Even if maybe one lineup had the winner, another lineup had, you know, the guy that finished dead last is after the cut. But yeah, this would be one of those weeks where I really utilize that, you know, second lineup to the full extent of, you know, maybe I start with Justin Rose, and then my second lineup, I just build 2 in the 9K and then go from there, something like that. So I'm kind of interested to see where these builds go on Wednesday night. I don't know if that's how you do, but yeah, it was something I picked up off of Notorious last year, and then I kind of tweaked it a little bit, just kind of testing out some strategies week to week. But yeah, I think most guys do like a 3v3. But yeah, I found a lot of decent results, especially in GPPs, because what I'll do is I'll enter all those in GPPs as well. But yeah, I'll basically hedge both lineups to some degree and run it in everything. And then I run the GPPs, you know, if I played Brooks or something like that, and like, yeah, I'll play him in all of these cash games and GPPs. And then like the Tournament Champions, you take Brooks out of your GPP player pool or something like that, as a small example.
Yeah, that's interesting. It's I mean, it's always good to get different perspectives on stuff. Yeah,
it's not saying it's right or wrong. It's probably wrong, but that's one way that I've attacked it over the last year and a half or so, and I think it's helped as far as kind of the puzzle pieces as far as putting lineups together. So, but yeah, let's drop down into the 8K range. Like you said, it's loaded. The 9K is sexy. I don't know how you would classify the 8K range, but you know, I'll kind of kick it off. There's obviously Jordan Spieth priced at $8,900. I think will jump out to a lot of people. I'm not interested in biting on Jordan Spieth. I don't anticipate you will say anything different. But the couple of names that really stand out to me, one is Abraham Answer, 8,200. Finished 20th last year at this event, coming off some really good finishes. 18th last week at the Desert Classic. Really had a bad third round. I thought he was going to do extremely well. He was on my cash lineup, and it was setting up to be great. And then, funny enough, like Zach Johnson finally played decent on the weekend and passed him up or finished just inside him, I think. But Abraham Answer, I think, is a really strong play. the Alexander Noren play is strictly off of course history and his last 2 starts on the European Tour. So he finished second here last year. We haven't seen him play, I think, back in November or like the very beginning of December. And his last 2 starts were 8th and a 9th. So I'm interested in Alexander Noren. I think he'll go overlooked. And then the last one that I'll kind of point out in this range is Brandt Snedeker, man. It's hard to get away from him. He's coming off decent finishes, but he's so putter reliant.
He's the best putter on POA in like the history of golf, I think.
He's like, up there. He's got to be like top 2 ever. So it kind of pains me to say, but like just looking through his course history, and like he's not coming in with bad form. Like last week I got off Hadwin because of the form. But yeah, Brandt Snedeker I think is an interesting play, and now whether or not ownership gets through the roof, I'm hoping the 8K range is stacked enough. None of these guys get like crazy ownership, but if anyone, I don't know where you stand, but if anyone like really grabbed a ton of ownership in the 8K range, assuming there's not a ton of crazy Speith fans out there, I think Cameron Champ maybe off of popularity, but I think Answer would probably get the most.
See, that's interesting. I think Champ probably gets some ownership. Him and so my 2 spots in this range where I do like Cameron Champ. I think that he can bomb it out there, and he's actually got a pretty good iron game.
Yeah,
it's just a matter of like he's just got a putt. Yeah, like that's his thing, and like that's fine. You know, I'll play some putting variance game, but his greens and regulation are great.
His upside is as high as anybody in this field. He's like a Finau 2.0. I don't know if anyone else has said that. I'm sure I've heard that. I'm probably just copying someone, but like, I mean, he's got kind of a similar game. He just bombs it. His iron play is pretty good. It's just a matter of can he make some putts. If he gets streaky, it's just a runaway.
Yeah, and I think this range, like I said, it's kind of a weird range where a lot of ownership is going to go above it. I think if people come into it, like I'm out on Speith, like forget it. Like you're legitimately, he's going to have to be like 7,600 for me to play him again.
If he was 5% owned, would you try? Or is it not even worth it at that point? Like to me, that's not even worth it.
I think he's gonna be 5% owned.
Really?
I think he's gonna be like 5% owned this week. I don't think you're gonna get a lot of people out there saying like, oh yeah, I'm playing Speith for contrarian purposes. I think you might get people playing Speith for contrarian purposes, but I don't think anybody out there in the DFS golf world is saying, yeah, I'm gonna jam Speith this week and like hope for the best. Like, no, even it's like you said you played golf with Jason today, and like Jason is the biggest Speith guy that I know, and like him and his wife are both big Speith people, and I don't even know if Jason's gonna play him this week. Like it's thin. I think he's gonna be like 5% owned.
You're probably right. It's just it's weird because at a certain, I think we kind of saw that last week with Rahm and Rose. Like at a certain point, people have a perception of ownership, and then they'll make pivots, and then that completely flips the ownership. I don't think Speith in this situation will be that drastic, but I know like Rahm last week should have been 35%, and then all of a sudden, Rose jumped to 25 or 28, and then Rahm came back down to 25. Like what?
Yeah, I was the idiot that pivoted down. I had like 40% Rahm and like 10% Rose, and then I was like, oh man, if Rose is going to be 15%, let me get up to 40%, and then
everyone did it.
And everyone did it.
It's a bummer.
But then Hideki is the second guy. I know that we're mentioning basically most of the players in this 8K range, but Hideki, man, I mean he's 8K. Like, and you know what? He's got okay course history. He's got a couple top 20s. I know Sony Open, he finished 51st or whatever, but he shot a 65 on Saturday, and he hit 75% of greens. So I'm okay gambling with a little bit with Hideki. If he looks like he's going to be like 15% owned, I'm probably going to be double the field. Because he's got, and talk about another guy with upside to win. If he can keep the driver straight, he's in, like, his putter isn't great, but if he can just get on greens, I mean, he fires at pins. Fires at pins. So if he's getting 10 foot for birdie on every hole, I mean, come on, he's got to make a couple of them.
He will. I think Yeah, I have a tough time with his upside a little bit. I feel like he's kind of flattened out in the last year. I mean, he's really just tapered off. But yeah, I probably personally won't get there. I think there's just too many other plays around there. Again, running 50 or 100 or 150 lineups, he should be in your player pool, no doubt, because he has the upside to win. It's just, yeah, personally, I have a tough time. I mean, he grades out really well in a lot of categories. I have a tough time.
So I'm a little worried about his ownership, just as an FYI to the world. But because did you see what happened when Mayo mentioned him earlier today?
I did not.
So Mayo, I think it was Mayo who said that he was like 66-1 on one of the betting sites, which is an absurd number. So I and everybody else who was following the whole shenanigan hopped on it, and then it fell to like 40-1 in like an hour and a half.
Yeah, I see it at 40 now.
Yeah, and like it was a split thing, and I think in my labs model, they have this correlation tool, and they basically said that anybody like Vegas odds has a very, very high correlation for this particular tournament every year to ownership. So when you see guys' odds fluctuate throughout the week, a lot of times I would bet that is going to influence their ownership, particular to this tournament more so than others.
Interesting. I could definitely see that. It's weird on a Monday, though. Like, throughout the week, like, Monday almost strikes me as a pricing error or just a Pat Mayo experience. But, throughout the week when it starts getting hammered, I guess, like if it starts at 100-1 and drops to, like, 60-1, I could definitely see that. Like a 7,000 price guy that's dropped all the way to 60-1 or something. But, yeah, sometimes the Monday one doesn't always pique my interest, but maybe I should look into some of those a little bit more as far as the correlation goes. But you're saying strictly from an ownership perspective, right? Yeah,
I think if anybody in this range is going to get ownership, I mean, it might be Champ because people look at him and he's the hot new toy.
Yeah.
I think Reed is going to go low owned. I think Noren's going to go low owned. I think Speed's going to go low owned. Speed's going to go really low owned. Snedeker has the course history, but I don't think he gets a ton of ownership, particularly because everybody's going to be talking about distance this week. I can tell you that he shot even par in like the best conditions of the entire day when he won in what was it, 16?
I agree. I mean, he's won it twice now. So, and the other upsides were, I mean, he's finished second twice in the last 9 or 8 years. It looks 9 years. So like the issue for me, like with Snedeker, and then we can hop out of the AK range, but like out of everyone in the AK range, I think maybe outside of Speith, I would probably rather play them over Snedeker. But then when you look at the upside for Snedeker, he's one that would pain me to skip over, and he finishes, top 4. Because I don't see a top 4 really, but he's obviously shown he plays his course and Poa Greens extremely well. It's tough for me to kind of overlook that.
Yeah, that's all fair.
All right, let's hop down into the 7Ks, and this is where things get a little juicy because I'll start off with my 2 favorite plays are on the high end of the 7K range. They should be in the 8K if it was me pricing them, but one is Sungjae M, which I got some flack for from Pat, and he proved, Sungjae proved Pat wrong again. He finished extremely well last week, 12th, coming off the 16th place finish at the Sony. And then JB Holmes, we haven't seen play in quite a while, if I'm not mistaken. Since like the end of September or end of October. But he has some really strong course history as well. So I'm interested in JB Holmes. But yeah, Sungjae M will be most likely in my cash lineup. He was in it the last couple weeks, and I don't know your thoughts on him, man, but he is. I feel like he's not as flashy as Champ, but he's. I guess not as talented. His upside's certainly there, but like consistency-wise, he's proven it for over a year and a half from the web.com till now, and now he's still showing it. Like the upside to win on the PGA Tour hasn't shown yet, but man, the dude's long enough. Like if you've seen him swing, he's got kind of a goofy, slow, almost like a mini Hideki swing, but he bombs it over 300. Like I think he was around 320 on the web.com, which generally runs a little bit warmer, a little bit hotter than the PGA Tour. But man, Sungjae Im at 7,800 on this course, I feel pretty good about. And then as we go down just slightly, and I'll stop above the 7,500s, but CT Pan has some very strange results here. Second place 2 years ago, a 35th last year. Arguably disappointing, but he doesn't strike me as a good fit on this golf course. So I'm kind of up in the air on CT Pan. And then Kyle Stanley I'm a little bit interested in. I think he's got the bomber aspect going. Has played well here in the past. So those are kind of the few that I like over 7,500. We'll kind of stop it there for right now.
Yeah, sure. I think so. I don't really see Stanley as a bomber.
Really?
I think, yeah. I mean, he hits it long. He doesn't hit it like I think Adam Scott hits it longer than Stanley does, or like Ryan Palmer in that range. I think he's kind of like in my view anyway, he's like a long iron guy. Okay. Where like he puts it in the fairway. I mean, I'm looking on my labs, table here, and he's 94% driving accuracy, and he's or percentile, I should say, not percent. The 94th percentile for driving accuracy, and then he's kind of like 70th for driving distance. So he's kind of like upper middle range. But I am in on Stanley though, because he fits the approach game to a T. He's definitely in there. I'll say this about kind of the 7K range in general is that I feel like I could probably monologue, 40 or however many guys there are in the 7K range, like almost that many that I would feel comfortable playing in GPPs. But I did have a couple that really stood out. I think Fratelli, I know he's right below, I guess, 7,500, but Fratelli I think he's going to be really good. He's just like, he's a talented guy. He hits it at decent ways. He makes birdies. He hits greens. He hits greens a lot. I think Luke List scares the hell out of me perpetually, but because he could 3-jack from 7 feet in pretty much any situation. But as far as like long iron players go, he's got to be kind of one of the premier. Or he had flashes of it last year where he was really up at the top. Kind of fell off and hasn't had the strongest of showings thus far the past like couple months. But I think he also is a scorer, which kind of does it for me. His bogey avoidance kind of sucks, which is kind of why he's rated a little bit lower. But he just at 7,700, I mean, he's worth firing off, because if he has a pretty decent day with the putter, he could top 10 this thing pretty easily.
Yeah.
And then you said Sungjae. I was really in on Sungjae last week, and I agreed completely with everything that you just said. I think he's going to be really good, and he's going to have a really good career as long as barring injury, etc. But his iron game is awesome. The one concern I have for Sungjae this week compared to, like I said, I played him a lot last week, and I'm going to be on him a lot this year. But one thing that stands out to me is that coming from Webb to the PGA Tour, they played on a lot of relatively easy courses in the Webb Tour. And then so far this season, schedule's been pretty easy in terms of like course difficulty, particularly last week. So I bet that last week he probably was chatting with his caddy saying like, man, these courses are just as easy as the Webb Tour. And Torrey is the awakening of all awakenings for any thought that like every course is going to be like that for the season.
Yeah.
So I mean, he might have played this course a bunch of times and I just don't know about it. But from what I could tell, relatively new to the course, coming off Webb where it's a relatively easier course load, and then coming from last week, he played well, and like I said, he's going to be really good, and his birdie stats are off the charts. But I think a lot of that has to do with course difficulty. And this week it's going to be, hey, you're going to need to save every single shot you can from hitting out of the rough. So I'm a little hesitant. I don't know what I'm doing with him yet. He could very well be like my top 10 highest owned golfers out of like 45 or whatever, but I could also fade him. I'm just kind of going back and forth there.
Yeah, that's actually a pretty good take because you're absolutely right. The courses he's played so far have been very low scoring. I mean, last week they were at the winning score through 3 rounds. It's just crazy. Yeah, and this week it'll be much more of a grind. Looking back at like his results at the PGA Championship and the U.S. Open from last year, which probably not completely comparative, but the difficulty of like the U.S. Open was a ridiculous test.
Wow.
He shot +9, and I think the cut was +8 or something like that. So like it was pretty close, but yeah, he didn't really fare that great at the PGA Championship either. That's interesting.
What do you think about Berger? I always get him wrong. I feel like talent wise he's a stud, but I also he's missed the last 2 cuts here, and he finished 12th last week on a relatively easy course. He's obviously a talented guy, and he's rating out really well in my laps model, but I'm kind of like in no man's land on whether I either want to play him or can play him because his bogey avoidance sucks.
Yeah, he's definitely talented. He didn't miss the cut by much the 2 years he missed. Like 2 years ago, he missed by 4 shots. So yes, that's a good number of shots to miss the cut by. But the year before, he missed by 1 and then finished 24th. So like course history, yeah, it's not great, but like, I mean, he gets to a weekend, he can shoot low. Like these are tougher golf courses, but he's proven that he's been able to do decent on tougher tracks. The results from last week was, I guess, pleasantly surprising. That's probably the best way to put it because coming back from injury, we haven't seen him play for a while. I just kind of took a wait-and-see approach. I think I played him in some GPPs, but he wasn't anywhere close to cash, and like at that price, he probably should have been. Right. So, like on this course, it's tough. He graded out so well last week, tee to green, approach, gained 3.3 strokes on approach last week. I mean, that's pretty solid. But again, like this is a different test of golf. So I personally am probably going to be out on Berger this week. I don't even know what his odds are at. Like he might be one of those you bet and just avoid. He's 66-1. So I mean, you could certainly do that. So I'm in on Berger as far as like the rest of the year. But this golf course, like you said, bogey avoidance. He's a very streaky player. It seems like this isn't his cup of tea now. Is a 12th place finish last week, granted he came back from injury, is that really good for him? You know what I mean? Like, yeah. Like if he finished 12th last week in that field and it was 24 under par, granted the winning score this week will probably be around 10 or possibly less in a much stronger field, what would he finish? He might finish close to the cut again, I'm guessing. So I probably won't jump on Berger this week.
Gotcha. I'm hoping he gets really popular by Wednesday so I can just hit the fade button and not think about it. So that's basically where I'm sitting.
Yeah, it's interesting. And then the other thing, like I don't know where his wrist is at, but that's one thing I tend to look at in like U.S. Opens is guys with some type of potential wrist issue. I think
this rough is thick. This rough is like no joke.
It's nasty. Yeah, for sure. And it doesn't sit up, like it sits down. Like you don't get good lies in this rough. It's going to sit down or at least be in the middle of it, and you have to be aggressive. There's no, sitting up, and it's like, the top layer of the rough last week was burnt out, and it's not rough at all. This week is going to be completely brutal. So, I'll probably skip over Berger, but I'm with you there. Going down the list a little bit further, for Telly, for sure. I was on him last week. He got off to a slow start and really finished well. Like for what I paid for him, I was pleasantly surprised where he ended up. He started off very slow. This seems like a good track for him. I feel like he is, coming from South Africa. He's playing long enough, like you said, but grinding. I feel like this is actually, this could fare better for him than last week being such a birdie fest. Mm-hmm. And then 7,200 Kevin Tway. I think, I wasn't on him at the Sony, but like this week, I could get behind some Kevin Tway as 7,200 on this type of golf course.
Kevin Tway is interesting to me because he he's kind of like really good at some of the stats and really bad at some of the other stats. So like if you just look at it from that basis, I think he's a bomber, but he misses the fairway a lot, and then he makes a ton of birdies, but he also makes a ton of bogeys. So like he's the ultimate GPP play if you're gonna fire there, because he's not gonna be owned at all. He's gonna be like 4 or 5% if that. Especially with HV3 sitting there, I think that he gets some ownership numbers. But yeah, so I mean, Tway is interesting.
What about Neiman, 7,300? I'm
in.
Are you?
Yep.
Are you?
Yep. Fire back up. Yep.
All right.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if he's going to be as highly owned as I egregiously just kind of snap accepted that, but I'm going to have some. I don't know how much I'll have, but I'm going to have some. I think that, he's really talented, and I think this course actually, like a tougher course, actually might fit him better because his bogey avoidance is really good. He makes birds. He hits greens. Even last week. Last week was the first week in, maybe not the first week in however many, but like looking back to last, what was it, October, I think it was like his worst green regulation percentage in that period of time. So I'll probably have some. I don't know. Maybe I'll have like a 10% or something like that. And probably still be double the field after we came off of like 25% Neiman last week.
Yeah, I wasn't terribly high on Neiman. I think I was definitely in the minority last week. His approach numbers in green regulation have been dipping quite a bit since that run during the summer last year.
How about Swafficer?
Man, him sneaking through the cut was like the worst part of last week because I didn't play much of him, and I played none of him except for maybe 2 entries in like the $5 just because like, well, I need some exposure because I can't get burned by freaking Hudson Swafford. And then he's crashing him. There's a couple guys that missed the cut that, Neiman was one of them. But like they were so popular, and Swafford wasn't as popular as I thought he would be, but still it would have been, sorry to all the listeners, but it would have been nice had he, missed the cut and all those people that chased, last year's result and then the Sony Open result. So yeah, I didn't really make a decision on him this week. Are you eyeballing him for a little bounce back? I mean, he's a heck of a ball striker for sure, but he's definitely in the GPP category if you want to go that route.
Yeah, so he's weird for me this week because we can get ownership narrowed down everybody for a second. Is like, all right, his price dropped, over $1,000. Yeah, the field's tougher, but going from 8,400 to 7,300 that's a pretty sizable drop for kind of the middle range. If he went from like 84 to 78, I think that nobody would bat an eye. I don't know what to make of his ownership because his course history isn't very good. And it's going to be like, that's going to be the difference for me, is that if he's like approaching 10%, like I'm out, I can fade him and kind of move on. And, he had a pretty mediocre showing last week. His bogey avoidance isn't very good. He's kind of middle of the road, everything else. Mm-hmm. And there are spots in that range that I like way better. And so like I'd rather honestly fade him and just tack an extra, 8% on Fratelli to be quite honest. And I think that even below that, I don't know how much of a brand, like when I say brand, I mean like players that you just play all the time. Like Steel Goat is my brand. Him, Albertson, and Fratelli are currently like my core stable of guys that I'm just gonna hammer until they win me all the money.
Yeah.
And so like Steel coming from the area, his bogey avoidance sucks, and his putting sucks, which is probably why I would assume that you're probably not on him. But his greens regulation,
I like Steele.
He's a ball striker. He's just,
and he's surprisingly long. I don't even think I realized how long he was until like 2 years ago. Because if you watch him swing, it's not powerful. At least to me, it doesn't look powerful.
Yeah, no, it doesn't.
Doesn't look like Brooks Koepka. We'll say that. Right. And
but
he hits it a shit ton. So
he's such a gritty player, and hashtag never forget, the 2017 Honda Classic. where, you know, he's like 6 over or whatever it was through 12 holes and like battled back and made the cut at 2 under. Like just complete absurd blackout run to make a cut and then finish like 29th or something like that. So he's a gritty player that I think on tough courses isn't quantifiable, but it's something like Zach Johnson on tough courses. I know that, you know, last week he burned me hard because I faded him. And of course he squeaked under the cut line and made a whole bunch of people a bunch of money. But I think Steele's kind of in that same thing where like he's going to grind the whole 36. Yeah. You know, and I think that's there's something to be said for that. And then Kokrak right there too is another guy that I'm on this week.
Okay. Yeah, back on Kokrak from last week, I think we talked about a little bit. Yep. He does fit this mold quite a bit. I didn't look at his course history. Looks like, not good.
He withdrew and missed a cut the last 2 years since the redesign of basically like half the courses, but he hasn't missed a cut in like several months. So at he can be 7,100. I'm okay with that. He actually ranks like 3rd or 4th in my labs model right now, which is kind of scary. But so I'm gonna have some.
Yeah, for sure.
And then Killa Keith Mitchell is also part of my brand. How could I forget Killa?
Everybody it seems like. Hard to argue. If he could just putt. You know.
I say the same thing about Steele. If he could putt, he'd win every tournament. Just ball striker. At least hit the ball down the fairway.
At least Steele's trying. He's got the long putter or whatever longer putter he's using now. Yeah. I got 2 more names in the 7K. If you don't have any left, we could drop in the 6K. Yes. So the 2 that I wanted to touch on, Harris English, I think is very interesting. Like you mentioned, Swafford. I would take the other Georgia Bulldog, Mr. Harris English here at 7,300. He doesn't have any like huge upside the last, probably dozen events he's played, but coming into this golf course, he does have decent statistics. Strokes gained approach looks solid. He's not losing in any category a tremendous amount, and he's played decent in this golf course. He is long too, so if you want to take that narrative, and ironically enough, he ranks 5th in 3-putt avoidance, which I wouldn't think from him, but you think a guy that hits it a little better would finish better if he's not putting poorly from short.
So it's actually really funny that you say that, because I was looking at him earlier when we were just kind of in preparation for this, and he's somebody that I love playing where you can kind of just spray it anywhere because his driving accuracy percentile is like really bad, but I snap look at that and then I look at bogey avoidance, and his bogey avoidance is really good in my labs model. So, and I couldn't put that together. So that 3-point avoidance actually makes a lot of sense of where he just gets it on and lags it really close and taps in for par and moves on.
Yeah. Again, he's a sprinkle in GPPs. Or, I mean, if you want to go overweight, then I don't blame you for it. But yeah, again, things don't match up where he's not like a core play by any means. It's just, I think I put Swafford and him in the kind of the same category. If you want the upside and you want to play, some guy that if he's clicking this week, he's like kind of Kevin Tway-ish. He has the upside to do really well.
And you know what? He's going to be, if Swafford is, I think Swafford's going to come out at like 8% this week, maybe 10% this week. Yeah, probably 8. And I think English is going to come out at like 2.
Oh yeah,
so
for sure.
So if you wanted, like, you can put equal weight on both of them or like not like 5% on both of them and be double the field on Harris and underweight on Swaff.
Yeah. Perfect. And you hit on Anders. I am on Anders Albertson, and it's hard to argue with his statistics, and then he hasn't played here, but he looked solid last week. Hopefully he's starting to get into a groove. He grades out in like the top 5 in a few categories that I was eyeballing. But yeah, let's hop down into 6K if you want, and we'll finish it off here. And
sure.
I'll let you kind of hit on any high points you have, and then I'll kind of wrap it up. I know we went a little bit long, but this was a good podcast. Kind of mixed up some strategy and some general kind of research thoughts mixed with the slate that we have. So, but yeah, let's hit this 6K range, and then we'll get you out of here.
Yeah, sure. I think there are a couple guys down here where 6K is like a sprinkle GPP range, so I'll rarely have more than like 12% on a guy. But the guys that I do like, I like Chesson Hadley. I'm in on that. I think his bogey avoidance is okay. His birdie's okay. He doesn't have the best course history here, but he has a top 25 last year. Nick Watney right next to him is another guy. You know, he's pretty solid in terms of like he'll make the cut for you. He's long off the tee. I think he's kind of okay. Like if you need a guy who's just gonna, below 7K that's gonna make the cut for you. I'm not advocating playing him in cash or anything, but he might make my league's team or something. And then another guy I'll say is Brandon Harkins. He's definitely long off the tee. My one issue with him is that I'm not sold on his greens and regulation, and he doesn't hit a ton of fairways. So he might be a guy that like I talk about now, and like he jumped off the page originally, but I might end up crossing him off. But he definitely could be worth a sprinkle in GPPs just to kind of differentiate down here. And then the last guy I'll mention, I mentioned the quote earlier from Ollie. I hate playing Ollie. I really do. There has never been a tournament where I've clicked the button like, yeah, this is Ollie's tournament. This is what we're doing. There's never been a spot. There's absolutely never been a spot like that. His long-term driving accuracy in my model right now is like the 6th percentile of all golfers. Like that's not golfers in this field. That's all golfers. And like, that's bad.
Yeah.
In case you didn't know, that's like not good. And on a tournament where you need to hit fairways, it like kind of worries me. But it's a guy that, he said he likes the course and he says it fits his eye. And he finished 9th here in 2017. And last year he was kind of battling some stuff and missed the cut. But it's kind of like a weird GPP flyer. I don't think he's going to be more than like a percent and a half owned. So you can go like 5% and be quadruple the field or whatever.
He had a chance last week. Like I was somewhat surprised he made the cut. Finished dead last after that, but I mean, I saw him for a bit. I was like, oh man, he turned it around, and nope, because I think he got to like 9 under on Friday, and then that's what the cut ended up being on Saturday. But like he just did nothing.
Yeah, yeah. And he scares the hell out of me. Like I never ever feel good clicking that button. It's just I saw the quote or I heard the quote. He was on no laying up like 3 weeks ago. That's where I got it from. And it's yeah, it was kind of just like crap. I mean, I have to play you because it fits your eye. Like what we talked about at the beginning of the podcast. Like he's got a lot of good swing thoughts at this course for some godforsaken reason. And now I have to go click, 5% Ollie. Here we go.
Yeah. So one thing, kind of I hear your reoccurring notes about bogey avoidance. Is that something that you're almost like your final pass on some of these guys? I know the 6K range is probably tough to decipher because these guys all have warts about them, but it seems like bogey avoidance is something you keep going back to. Is that kind of your ongoing trend this week?
This week, this week I think so. I think on a normal week, usually my deciding factor is birdie percentage.
Okay.
Birdie or better percentage. That's usually like my final, like if I'm deciding between two guys, I either look at history or I look at birdie percentage because I want the guys who are going to score. This week, like you said, now I'm adjusting a little bit and recognizing that Gary Woodland shot 6 over on Sunday in 2016, so I kind of throw out that 6 under winning score. But like I think the winning score is going to be somewhere between like 12 under ish. Okay. And on tournaments like that, it's kind of almost like the Masters and I mean that in like the most basic of sense. I'm not comping this tournament to the Masters, but what I mean by that is the guys who are going to play well can get themselves out of spots, because if you miss the fairway, you're going to need to get out of those spots. And it's similar with Augusta. I'm sure everybody who's listening to this watched, last year with Sergio out of the rocks or
out of that river.
Little creek,
raised creek. Or
yeah.
Yeah.
But so that's what I mean by that. And I think this tournament, from that perspective, is similar. Where if you're in the rough, it's thick, it's tough. We already talked ad nauseum about that. But you're gonna need to get up and down, or at least kind of salvage somehow. And I think that's probably gonna end up being my tiebreaker instead of birdies this week.
Okay.
It'll be either bogey avoidance or history. I
gotcha. All right. So the couple guys that I'm looking at that kind of struck me when I first looked through here, Sam Ryder jumped out, but I feel like I'm somewhat chasing. He played in this event last year, and he missed the cut by 3, I think. Yeah, I missed the cut by 3 last year. But again, he strikes me as like the Kevin Twade type. So in GPPs for sure, I think a sprinkle of Sam Ryder is a good play. And he really had a nice bounce back last week coming off the miscut at the Sony Open. I mean, he didn't do very well. I think he shot like 1 under or something on Sunday. But to make the cut, I think people were skipping over him.
He is 10th in my fantasy national model right now too. So yeah, I had him starred as being like I'm probably gonna end up playing this guy a decent amount, but I'm not sure how much yet.
He's a stat hog, like
yeah. And that's like Kyle Stanley. It's kind of the same thing. Like he's the stat god, just walking around, hitting it on the green, and then like hopefully 2 putting for par or whatever.
Yeah, which isn't a bad thing. Definitely not.
No, especially here.
Yeah. So another guy that I kind of overlooked last week, which I don't plan to do again this week. He didn't really do much, but Rory Sabbatini has some very interesting course history. He's not as long as he used to be. What's that?
The Slovakian.
Is he Slovakian?
No, his wife is, and he converted. He
just switched his
citizenship so that he could play in the Olympics.
Oh yeah. Where's he from?
He's South African.
South African,
but his wife is Slovakian, so he got Slovakian citizenship.
Yeah, but like, don't the South Africans have a Olympic team?
Yeah, but he probably didn't think he could beat out Dylan Fratelli.
That's true. Dylan and Brandon Grace and all those guys.
Schwartzel and
Oosthuizen.
There's a lot of good. Yeah, there's a lot of South Africans.
That's true.
There, but...
play the game.
No, I also don't think he did the change for that. I think it was part of like an EU type of deal, or like not an EU. It was like. There was another reason why he actually made the change, but it was funny when it came out because it was covered more by Golf Channel than anything else, obviously. And I was like, oh, man, he's just doing it for the Olympics. It's like, oh, okay.
I can get behind that. And then one cheap one that I kind of got tossed in. I'll give Roslin a little bit of credit, but Wyndham Clark finished 18th last week of the Desert Classic. Strokes gain approach looks like absolute trash, but I'll have to actually probably pass over to you for bogey avoidance because that looks like garbage. That's probably
God.
why. Yeah, never mind. Probably last week on the birdies was a good thing. This week, not so much.
I'm gonna chat with Rosalind and somebody mentioned like it's Wyndham Clark week, and all I could think about was, oh my God, like what have we become? This is like the strongest field that we've had in 5 months or however long it is, and everybody is now going crazy over Wyndham Clark, who, by the way, hasn't had over 68% greens in regulation since the Safeway Open in the beginning of October, and he's played 5 tournaments since then. Mm-hmm. So personally, I'm out, but you do you.
Yeah, I'll probably pass.
His bogey avoidance on labs is actually really good.
Really?
Yeah, 87 percentile.
Huh.
Long term, but he doesn't hit fairways, and his distance is really good.
Interesting. All right, last guy I'll kind of throw out there, Cameron Davis, Australian. Played here last year, 58th, didn't make the cut, but grades out really well in strokes gained approach. Bogey avoidance is not the worst. So we'll probably give him a pass on that. And driving distance, it didn't look like he's terribly long, but from what I've seen, he's probably one of the longer raw hitters. So hits a decent amount of greens. I like that. But yeah, for a $6,600 guy, Cameron Davis, and then like just kind of throwing it out there, guys I'm interested in playing. And it may just turn into like a top 10 bet or something like that. But Doug Gim, I think, will get some hype. And like, I understand the upside. He's kind of in that, Neiman category, more or less, or Cameron Champ. Definitely not a bomber, but he's in that category. And then Victor Hovland from Oklahoma State. He won the U.S. Am, so you'll see him at the U.S. Open this year at Pebble Beach. But he's 6,700. I still don't get how some of these guys get priced that high. Like, if they have no history, like, why are they 6,700? But I would be interested in playing, some GPPs, throw him in there if he makes the cut. And some of these AMs, or not AMs, but like new rookies are trying to get on tour. Like, they have extra fire. Like, they'll finish top 30 or trying to get to top 10 to get into the next week. So I'm interested in, sprinkling. Gim, not so much. I'll have a little bit, but Hovland, I'm very interested in just trying to ride that a little bit.
Interesting. I might actually take a deeper look at that. It actually speaks a lot to, there are a bunch of guys in this 6K range that I could certainly see myself kind of sprinkling on. Gim was one that I had considered earlier today. I don't know whether I'll go there, but I do like you do kind of have to sprinkle them when you're max multi-entering. So that's an important distinction to make as far as like tournament selection and things like that. Like, if I was single entering, a lot of these guys wouldn't even cross into my view. But
Absolutely.
Like Roger Sloan, I've considered a little bit of. He's actually grades out pretty well in my model here. One guy that I'm not playing this week, and this will be the last guy I mention, unless you want to talk about it a little further, but one guy I'm for full disclosure, I will not be playing him at all this week, but it's somebody that I'm keeping an eye on, and I want for my opportunity to speak to the people here. I think that Brandon Hagee, keep an eye on that. Like, he's coming back from this injury, and he hasn't played well since he's come back, and he's missed a bunch of cuts. So it's not something that I'm really looking for an opportunity to jam, but he shot 68, 67 on Friday, Saturday last week. And he usually hits a decent amount of greens. And I think if he can get back to that, he is like the Luke List plus, where he can bomb it, he can score. His bogey avoidance is actually solid long term, like looking back, last 20 tournaments prior to injury. And that includes web events. So he got hurt in like August with his wrist injury, and then and he kind of hasn't done anything since, and barely played over the fall swing, but he missed a bunch of cuts. But it's somebody that I'm kind of long term. I'll probably burn a few dollars trying to get early on that. I won't be this week, but for somebody to keep an eye on.
Decent weekend last week.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah, that's I'll probably leave it at that. I know we went much longer than our normal show, but again, I think this was probably one of our best shows we've had this year. 3 weeks in, probably all of last year as well.
Yes.
You made the top. You made the top three of the last three. But yeah, man, thank you so much, Nick, for joining us this week. This was I definitely learned a lot. I'm sure the listeners will be very, very excited to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, happy to be here, and I do love always. I love talking golf, so it's good to. I'm happy to be on and just kind of have that opportunity to do that. If anybody wants to reach out to me, I'm pretty open. If you want to just ask me a question or whatever on Twitter, it's just Nick Varone, so it's pretty easy to remember.
And if they want to lose money, they just grab your head-to-heads, right?
Oh God! I'm recently, or you probably are in the way better spot of just grabbing all my head-to-heads. Like I said, I've been experimenting with some cash stuff, so we'll see how that goes.
Yeah, man. No, I'm sure you'll do fine. But yeah, thanks again for joining us, and thank you to all those that listen to this week's podcast. Again, you can find us at fantasygolfbag.com. You will find us on Wednesday night on our Wednesday night live stream for the PGA Tour. That will come on at 9 p.m. Eastern. You can find that at twitch.tv/Redkacheek. And I will actually, as an added note, I'll be at the PGA merchandise show all this week. So if you are in the Orlando area or at the PGA show, give me a shout. I'll be touring around, checking out some equipment and some new merchandise booths, and hopefully we can find some interesting things that take us through as far as partnerships go for the Fantasy Golf Bag podcast the rest of the year. But yeah, without further ado, guys, thank you so much. Good luck this week with your lineups. Good luck in all your contests. Hopefully you don't take all of Nick's head-to-heads. Might not be a plus EV move. But again, Nick, thanks so much, and we will see you guys later this week.